he is a validation lead for IBM Power Architecture, and currently is working on Power 10. He is involved in Power 10 validation. So I would invite Vinod Bussa to start the presentation.
Hey, thanks. I will start sharing my presentation. Okay, yeah, are you able to see my screen? Abhi, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Mr. Vinod, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there are two presentations, like two parts. One is instruction set architecture overview, and then the second part would be A2O processor, which is open source and which is based on this instruction set architecture. So a brief introduction on that. So first, I would be going through the instruction set architecture overview. So we would have heard power a lot of times, but when it comes to the meaning of power is for RISC processor, IBM RISC processor is called power architecture processor. So the meaning of the power is power optimized with enhanced RISC, and AS stands for application system. So in general, power AS, ISA is what it is called, ISA, instruction set architecture. This is what gives the outline of how the power architecture implementation is, like what all are the different units, what are our different registers, what all are different instructions. So IBM generally implements based on this instruction set architecture, and it is open source. So if anybody wants to implement based on this, they would be able to implement.
Sorry.
Okay.
No,
so
this is IoT Lab.
Is a RISC architecture, as we all know. RISC stands for Reduced Instruction Set Architecture, and then it originally was mainly a big Endian oriented, but it does supports Little Endian and Big Endian, both of them, and Linux is mainly Little Endian. So it, like IBM PART processor supports Little Endian very well too. Then to just name a few operating systems at present which run on top of Power PC architecture, AIX. AIX is Advanced Interactive Executive Operating System. And then IBM I is another operating system. Then Linux is one operating system. So these are different operating systems which run on IBM processors. Okay, so coming to the architecture, it's basically a 64-bit architecture. So there used to be earlier 32-bit PowerPC based systems. So the systems were like 603, 604, 750 and stuff like that. But then there is still a backward compatibility where the processors still support 32-bit applications to run and things like that. Then here, the next few points are basically talking about different implementations or different instruction set architectures. Now, if you see mostly, or maybe this is what it's telling, like processor P6 actually is implemented 2.05 is architecture. Similarly, P7 implemented 2.06, P8 is 2.07, P9 is 3.0B. So these are like every version as instruction set architecture evolves, this is a mapping which tells to what it is mapped. If we go through instruction set architecture, there it's divided into different books. So book 1 basically talks about different instruction categories like branches, load stores, then arithmetic operations, where arithmetic operations only happen from register to register, unlike other architectures. Then there's a fixed point unit. BFP is binary floating point. DFP is decimal floating point. Then there are two kind of vector units. One is vector, and then other is vector scalar instructions and registers. So these all are different basic information which is covered in book 1, and this is the level at which generally application programs or the users who write programs will be dealing with these instructions registers. Then these all are special purpose registers which are present, like condition register, count register, target address register, link register. Then coming when there are fixed point operations, there is a register called fixed point exception register, which tells us things like, if we do 0 by 1 or like 1 by 0 or things like that. When those kind of stuff are done, there are some exception bits which are set, using which we can know what is happening. Then there is a similar control register on floating point, status and control register. So this helps in floating point operations, like different rounding modes. Do you want to round to 0, or do you want to round to infinity? Do you want to round to different round to the nearest, and all of that. And then it also has some status bits which tells like underflow, overflow, those kind of exceptions. And there is a similar kind of register for a vector unit also, which is called vector status and control register. Okay, coming to branches, there are different kind of branches, like relative branches, absolute branches. And then there is another one, which is conditional branch also. And it depends on different fields which are part of the instruction, which will, tell how the branch should be taken. And then there are branches which are, which can also use link register. You can update the link register, or you can branch to the address which is present in the link register. Generally, if you guys have seen the PowerPC assembler, you would have seen BLR. So basically they are telling go and branch to the link register. There would be an instruction called BLRL, which tells, go and branch, but my next address instruction, store it in LR, so that when it's like these mainly are used for sub function calls. So I'll branch off from here, but I will have the return address in the link register, the next instruction address, so that from there we do a BLR, you will come back to the place from where you have called this routine, to the parent routine or the main program, so that's where these instructions are used. Okay, condition register is one of the special purpose register that we went through in a couple of slides back. So condition register is mainly, when you want to compare stuff like you are doing some fixed point operations, and then you want to compare two registers or two numbers or whatever you want to tell, like whether they're equal or less than or greater than. So that is the time condition register is used. So condition register has different fields, like it'll have equal to bit, it'll have less than, greater than. So when after doing a compare operation by reading the condition register, you can take a decision. You want to branch or you want to do something else on seeing that, we can do that. So this is about condition register. So there are There are basically 4-bit fields which tell about this condition, and there are 8 those kind of fields which you can use. And generally CR0 is updated by all arithmetic instructions, and then CR1 is generally updated by BFP, DFP, and BSX instructions. Then CR6 is updated by VMX dot. So these are a lot of different instructions which use CR and update them. Then there are instructions which can modify CR. So one way is implicit modification, one way is explicit. So when the other instructions do compare and stuff like that, they are implicitly modified under the covers. Though we don't do any instruction directly to modify the CR, they're implicitly modified. And then you can also manipulate or modify explicitly by doing some CR instructions. They are like CR and, CR NAND, CR XOR, CR OR, CR NOR. And then you can also move some value to CR if you want. These are the instructions which help in doing that. Then similar to branch to link register, there are a couple of more branches, like a branch to count register, branch to count. So basically, and then target register. This is not exactly like link register, but somewhat similar. What can happen is you guys know that we write for loops, while loops. So you can tell you want to branch while something, right? Or for 0 to 10. So what happens is this count register will be initialized with 10, and every time you branch, he will be comparing with counter register. He'll be decrementing the count in the counter register, and then he'll again branch. He'll come back, and it'll help in those kind of branches, while loops, for loops. So that is what is about count register. Then target address register is something similar to link register. It's used in similar way, where you can, whatever is there in target address register, you can branch off to that. Link register, anyway, we have gone through it. Okay, there is something called BHRV, branch history rolling buffer. So as we all know that whenever there is a branch involved, there is a lot of penalty, because there is a path which is taken and non-taken, and that is an area of research, or that is an area where processors what we call performance depends a lot on how they deal with branches. So branch history rolling buffer, or BHRB, is something which will help microarchitecturally to give a hint to the processor whether to, to tell him that branch is taken or non-taken, depending upon history, how the previous branches have taken place. So this is the, that buffer which microarchitecture keeps filling in, and then for predicting next branches, it'll use. So there are some instructions actually which clears the BHRB if we don't want to use the history, any applications do not want to use the history, they can do this. And then there is also move from BHRB, which will read the contents from this history buffer. Okay, coming to fixed point unit. So this is like a general operations like add, subtract, multiply, rotate, compare. All of these are general fixed point operations which we do. And these the fixed point instructions don't directly access memory. They only operate on registers. So there are, for fixed point unit, there are 32 general purpose registers on which they'll operate, and each register is a 64-bit width. And fixed point exception register we have covered. Then moving on to floating point. So in floating point, different kind of precisions are supported: single precision, double precision, and then similar to GPRs, there are 32 FPRs. Then there is also VMX, like vector instructions. So there, the precision supported is 32-bit or single precision. And then even we have 32-bit VRs for that. And all of the VMX instructions begin with letter V if you are going through ISA. And then binary floating point instructions, begin with letter F. Then there is a decimal floating point where the instructions start with Q and they access the 32 FPR. So between PFP and DFP, the registers are common. And here the operations are of two different kinds, 32-bit operands and 64-bit operands is what they operate on. And there is something called extended where they operate on 128 also. They use a pair of registers, like two floating point registers. So that's how they operate. Then there is another unit called vector scalar extension unit where single precision and double precision is supported. And then there are 64 VSRs, the registers, and all of these instructions begin with the letter X. Okay, so that's a very brief introduction about Power ISA, which will help in understanding and going through the power instruction set architecture. So I will share this presentation. So this link, you would be able to download the Power ISA architecture document here, and you can go through it, to get further information and stuff like that. Okay, so that's about power instruction set architecture. So I will start sharing the other presentation. And while I do that, if you guys have any questions, you can ask.
Hey Vinod, this is Arjun here. So one very quick question about the ISA and its features actually. So does ISA also support the multi-instruction? The multi-interrupt controller kind of a thing? So let's say if there are any, first of all, I'm not sure if there is any multi-interrupt controller kind of a unit as part of the power architecture, which I believe you'll be covering in the next slides. But with or without the presence, I believe there should be some support in the ISA in any processor to handle multiple interrupts, which are coming at the same time. I mean, I'm talking about the spurious interrupts that generally occurs, in a real-time scenario. What is the support within the ISA for this? Is my question.
Yeah, so there are different kind of interrupts. One is the interrupts which are within the processor, and then there are interrupts which come from external devices or external sources, like maybe an Ethernet card or some other graphics card or hard disk, things like that. Those are categorized as external interrupts. And then there are interrupts which occur within the core itself, like translation interrupts. Or if you come to floating point interrupts, you can also generate floating point interrupts when an underflow occurs, overflow occurs. And similarly, as I just covered, like different kind of translation interrupts, like a page miss or like translation is not present, and those kind of stuff. So one classic example would be segmentation fault, right? Like you don't have a translation, or we accessed the wrong location or a wrong address. Application accessed the wrong address, and then there is an interrupt because he doesn't have access, he doesn't have a translation, or he doesn't have permission. Yeah, and then permission would be other kind of interrupts. So these are all different kind of interrupts. So see, instruction set architecture basically talks about all of these interrupts which come under core if you go through the instruction set architecture. And there are addresses to which each interrupt comes. Like if you take in PowerPC architecture, hex 300, you will get an data storage interrupt, something like a page miss, and then for an instruction miss, you will get a 400. So it talks about all of the interrupts which are within a core in general in instruction set architecture. So there are some interrupts which come externally. So generally 500 is a place or a vector handler in Power architecture for external interrupt, but it covers external interrupt, but it doesn't, there are other documents which cover more about, like external interrupts. There is an external interrupt vector engine actually in case of Power architecture, but that's not covered as part of instruction set architecture. So I'm just thinking where you are coming from. Are you interested in external interrupts or interrupts within a core?
In fact, both. So because see, there are L1, L2 caches and memories and some other peripherals. For example, if the processor is supporting some crypto operations, there are inbuilt crypto cores available as part of your processor core, right? And there will also be inbuilt L1 memory controllers also. So the memory mapping of those will be aligned to some kind of an address map, right? So that asks for the interrupt mechanism within the processor core. Number two, when this particular processor core is made available as part of a system on chip, so where the processor will be connected to multiple peripherals. It can be Ethernet, it can be some memory controller, or it can be any functional IP like Bluetooth or whatever it is. So basically, so that mechanism will talk about the external interrupts, right? So Ethernet trying to gain access of the master core, or some other peripheral trying to gain access of the master core, or simultaneously both trying to gain access over the master core based on the priority algorithms which are set is another aspect, right? So I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to arrive at both. My question is with the perspective of both, actually.
Yeah, meaning, see, there are different levels. See, when we are running on a particular thread, each thread can actually handle an interrupt. Within a core, there could be more than one thread. So I'm talking about hardware threads and not software threads or not POSIX threads. I'm talking about real hardware threads, or you have more than one core, right? So on whichever core you're running and whichever thread can running, they can handle in general all the interrupts which come within a core, like be it a page fault. Like this particular thread is trying to access something, he got a page fault, he got a segment fault, or he got a translation permission fault, or he got different kind of signals, right? Operating systems also have signals. So all of that are handled at a core level. And then, in general, whenever there is one interrupt and as long as you are an interrupt handler, there are other interrupts you generally don't get other interrupts, or other interrupts are masked off, and only then when you complete this interrupt, you get the other interrupts. But in general, at a thread level, at a core level, as every thread and every core is able to, handle the interrupts, that's not a problem. We won't face any problem. But where the problem can come is when there is an external devices, and then when you get an external interrupt at first level, nobody knows actually to which thread or which core the interrupt is supposed to be coming, right? So if we take very basic processors, what they do is they always send the external interrupt to a particular core, like core 0 or thread 0, and then he processes it, and then he decides which application got it or which operating system got it. If it's an hypervisor, he may look at which operating system or application got it, and he has to reroute it and stuff like that. And if it is an operating system, similarly, he still has to look which application got it or which process got it, and then he has to handle it. So those are some of the overheads which are there. But that is where, if it's a basic processor, but that's where Power architecture has its own methodology. It has an engine, external interrupt engine, where it can send interrupt to a specific thread, specific processor, specific application, that kind of stuff. But that external interrupt details are not covered in basic instruction set architecture which is present. So there are some other documents and I need to look at them, and I also have to check if they can be shared externally. So that is something I can
No problem. That's okay.
that I can come back on it, and then maybe Ganeshan can help us in coordinating that. But that happens. So there is a very advanced engine which will help us to external, if there are external interrupts, it will help us to get out of that overhead. And P9 is where the first time that engine was implemented, and it's continued to be supported on P10 also.
Great. That, I think that pretty much answers. I understand. So one final question before I conclude and you move on. So are there any specific set of libraries that you can just help us showcase in this presentation, which will be required pretty much to write an ISR, interrupt service routine, for a processor, for an SoC, which is built around an A2O or A2I core?
Yeah, so generally interrupt, if you're talking about very low interrupt handlers, they are not, libraries don't deal with it. It's basically very low level code. People write in assembly language and C language generally, and you won't have libraries for that. But if you are talking about even for secondary level handlers, right, I don't think so you'll have libraries, right? Because it's morely about operating system will do or hypervisor will do, and then it's not done at library or application level. Maybe you can find signal handlers which are done at operating system level, but generally those are not you won't find that. So
yeah, just so generally what I'm trying to arrive at is, let's say if you are writing a C code and if the interrupt is set for a specific task that you're arriving at, you generally poll for that interrupt, right? So you will generally poll for the signal to be set. And the other way to find out is basically you will wait for that signal to get asserted. There is a difference. So you are using a register or probably a flag. So from your C test case or your high level test case, you will try to poll and you will find out the flag to be set. The second, as I said, basically is the signal level or the pinwiggle level assertion of a signal. You check whether it is going high or low. So, for example, if it is a DMA interrupt, let us say PCI has DMA underscore INT, you check for the assertion of that signal is one way, and the corresponding signals, corresponding enabling of the flag in the register is one way. So when I talk about libraries, I meant to talk about the REL, the register abstraction layer support for the ICA in writing this ISR. That's what I meant.
Yeah, so see that handling of the interrupt at very, as you said, those are like those devices. Basically, you will poll on the registers of those devices, and it's very specific to those devices. And then it's first level of interrupt handling, right? So those are not a part of any libraries, basically. So it is like you won't be able to find a library on that. It's very basic code of the operating system or hypervisor.
Okay, sure, yeah. That's it from mine. Maybe we'll move on to the next part of the presentation unless other people have any question.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this is about a A2 processor. I haven't created these slides. I'm, reusing the slides which were earlier created by some IBM folks. So this is about a processor which earlier was used in BlueGene Q, and there it was called A2I, and it has 4 threads per core, and then instructions are executed in order, and throughput is optimized. But whatever is released it's based on that, but it's a little bit different. So it's A2O. O stands for Open Community, and then there are 2 threads per core, and then instructions are executed out of order, and single thread performance is optimized. So this processor was originally targeted for routers and stuff like that, edge computing devices, AI, autonomous driving. So these are all different things. And you can connect to some auxiliary execution units, which we will discuss a little bit down the line. Okay, basically this is A2O is 64-bit power instruction set architecture, and in power instruction set architecture there are, as I said, there are different books and stuff like that. So this mainly is based on book 3 embedded version, which stands for E. And in book and power EC there is also a server version, which is where it would be E wouldn't be present. That is the thing. And then it has I was talking about hardware threads, right? So that is what is SMT, simultaneous multi-threading. That is what is meant by hardware threading. And it has an L1 cache of 32 KB, and it's a 4-way instruction cache. And when it comes to data cache, it is 32 KB and 8-way, and each line is of 64 bytes. Then there is something called completion buffer. That is like whenever instruction completes, there would be a completion buffer. There in the microarchitecturally at a pipeline level, they use that. So because they'll be doing out of ordering instructions and then pipeline instructions. So completion buffer is used internally, and which is 32 entry buffer. Then there is an MMU which has TLB, and then which is a 4-way TLB, and 512 are different congruence classes are present in the TLB. So this is something, AXU is something, external unit, auxiliary external unit. So we'll go through this a little bit. And there is a full support for big and little endian. Then coming to the microarchitecture, this is a microarchitecture. So we can see whatever we have just spoken, the MMU 512 entry TLB, and iCache is of 32 KB. And then there is a ERAT on top of TLB. ERAT is something called effective to real address translation. So this helps in optimization. You need not go through the TLB or the page table, to really get the entry. If that translation is already present in the ERAT, you will just use it. And then here there is a branch history, branch unit basically. And then this is the branch history table, BHT. Then there are different units here. Yeah, this is the fixed point unit, FXU0, and then another fixed point unit called FXU1. And these are something called rename buffers. So a rename is something like, you have a lot of instructions which are using the same registers. Suppose I take an example called R3, R4, R5. Just imagine that I have 10 instructions sequentially, and all of them are using R3, R4, R5. So what happens is, first I execute first instruction, and as the processor is out of order, he can go and execute other instructions. But then what he sees is he is dependent on the previous registers which are being in use, so he wouldn't be able to go and execute out of order. So to overcome this problem, microarchitecturally, they use something called rename buffers. So instead of using the original registers, they use some other registers, but then finally, they'll update the main architecture registers, but then they go ahead and use, some copy of the registers or some buffer, which are called rename registers or rename buffers, so that, they can go and execute out of order. Okay, so this talks about this one. It's like a 128 byte read and write happens, and with the data cache. Okay, so that's the microarchitecture stuff. And I think most of these things we have just covered. So I don't think so they're covering AXU. Let me cover here. So AXU is something where you can connect an FPGA here. You would have heard about external units which can do something specific we want. So AXU unit is something of that sort, where you can connect to a processor. But something which is interesting with power architecture is, whatever unit you connect here, it's coherent with the main processor. So coherent meaning, so whatever operations you do, like read, write, either by the processor or by the external FPGA, all of them are coherent. Like if AXU does some read and write to the memory, other cores will be able to see it. And similarly, if the other cores or the threads will do a read or write, AXU will be able to see it. So that's something very unique about the power architecture. Okay, here they're talking about a little bit about instruction fetch. So generally, each instruction is 4-byte length in power architecture. So there is a 64-byte cache line. So a lot of instructions fit in one cache line. And then whatever I have spoken about ERAT, in effective to real address translation, there is a 16 entry fully associated to ERAT. Then there is an 18 KB hybrid branch predictor. Link stack is also something to do with the branches, which will help us to link. That's eight entry one. And then I have spoken about renames anyway. Okay, and A2O has load store units and instruction execution units, fixed point units. So there are two, FXU0 and FXU1. And then there is one load store unit. And it also has a floating point unit which supports double precision. And they're also talking about cycles actually, how many cycles you can do an instruction. So in fixed point unit it is 2 bit per cycle. Then here they're talking about in L1, whenever a load or store happens, you can in 4 cycles they can do a load, that kind of stuff. And in case of floating point, the latency is 6 cycles. Okay. Okay, so this is, I think if you want to implement this A2O in an FPGA, they're giving this board design. Then here they're talking about nanometers, like which frequency runs at which nanometers. Okay. I think this is a brief instruction about A2O. If anybody has any questions, I can go through it more. Okay.
Hey Vinod, this is Arjun again. Yeah. So actually, I basically hail from a verification and validation background. I'm actually a source verification engineer. I work pretty much on processor verification as well. Worked on processor cores like Tensilica, currently in fact RISC-V, and other Motorola and TI process. So one quick question that I have in the perspective, I know that we are talking about the architectural features of a single core here. However, understanding a situation where we have multi-processor SoC, so that really calls for a mechanism to allocate the shared resources, right? So my question here is there, so generally it's a common convention that the processor core comes with a hardware semaphore kind of a thing. Does A2 have support for such shared memory or resource allocations? Maybe if there is some light which can be thrown on some shared memory allocation stuff like hardware semaphore kind of a thing is what I'm trying to understand. I did go through the specification apart from the inputs that you have given. I couldn't find one such. If you have any info, please go ahead and share it.
Okay, so let me understand a little more. So when you are telling there are multiple cores involved, and then you are accessing some shared resources. So what do you mean by shared resource? So is it memory or something else?
It can be both. It can be memory, it can be a bus, it can be a controller. So all those which are mapped to, so basically when I say this, let me give you more clarity about it. So let's say if you are talking about a multi-core system on chip, multi-processor system on chip. So there is one processor core which will be acting as a master, which will give access to the other cores, right? So let's say we are talking about 4 different cores of 4 different, which are performing 4 different operations. But it is a situation where a couple of interfaces are be a bus or could be a memory. It could be, when I say memory, it could be L2 or it could be L3. L3 memory, which is connected to the system on chip through a controller, right? So it can be a memory or a peripheral, both trying to gain access to one of the processor core at the same time. So unlike the other situation we spoke about in the earlier presentation that I was asking, so it is a situation where you have to assign some mechanism. We need a mechanism to allocate access to the shared resources, right? So you need to bring in a handshake. For example, there is a semaphore key, which is generally generated by this hardware semaphore block, and that will actually allocate the key to the current processor core which is being served for the interrupt raised. And once it is done, the key is actually released back to the semaphore. So something like that is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so that is mainly we are going into the bus architecture, which connects the different processors or interconnects. So there is a totally a different architecture for it. Like how there is a core architecture, instruction set architecture, there is a different architecture for it. So there are different methods to it. Like, you know, you broadcast something on the bus and then, you know, whoever is supposed to pick up, he will pick up and he will work on it, and you know, different forms of it. But that will be a totally a different architecture, and there are different manuals for it, and then there are different specifications for it. So one part.
Do you have any information about the bus architectures to which A2O is compliant to?
A2O, see, generally a lot of power architectures are compliant to similar kind of bus architecture, but I need to go and check because for this call, I did not check that. Generally, I know
no problem. I understand.
of some stuff, but then I don't know what level they have externally shared or what is it. So I can look for that.
Sure. That will be helpful if you can actually. So I'm assuming at least support to the conventional bus architectures like AMBA should be of support. I believe, because AMBA XA4, XA3 are kind of capable to handle such things. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's like a hardware specific, right? So it's not like it will be compliant. It can be compliant to some other external. It can be or need not be. But what happens is it's like a core to core, right? It's within a system or within a processor, right? Like so they make sure that it works. And if you are even talking about connecting to AFU or AFX, even or some IO like external stuff, still there to, you know, interconnect or the bus which connects them will become important. But it depends actually whether it is compliant externally or not, because nobody is going to replace those interconnects or buses, you know, from that angle. So it can be specific to a specific hardware.
Yeah, I get that. So there is a reason actually, Vinod, why I'm asking this question. So when it comes to building an AI workload catering chipsets, AI, ML or IoT, where you will have multiple peripherals and the design complexity is pretty huge, and the kind of workloads you handle are quite complex and big in size. So at times, what I'm noticing is, if you have the bus architectures or the interconnect handle the arbitration part that we spoke about, we can call it as arbitration, right? So apart from multiplexing, apart from the address decoding, if it is also handling the address arbitration part, don't you think it is actually adding up to the latency or the overhead of the processor core, assuming understanding the fact that we are talking about AI ML kind of non-conventional workloads which are quite data compute intensive, and it is actually adding up to the actual latency and taking a toll on the efficiency. So I was just curious to know if there is any inbuilt architecture apart from the interconnects handling this arbitration or shared memory resource allocation, something like the hardware semaphore, which RISC-V has a support to, right? Or probably the Tensilica processor cores, which are quite widely used in the AI/ML chipsets these days, have support to. So my question is aligned, pretty much aligned to that perspective actually. I
Yeah,
hope you now understand where is it that I'm trying to arrive at.
yeah, agree. So the only thing little different here is, see, first thing is power architecture in general is very compliant to AI, and then performance is very good uh, on power architecture. So that's how they get all of this optimization. One is core performance, one is interconnect performance, all of that. But then one thing which is little different from the examples we have given is this is a server processor or server architecture, not A2O, but in general power architecture where the performance is very good and stuff like that, right? So that's the reason you won't find that interconnects and those kind of stuff being spoken like how you speak discuss about risk and other process, right? So that's the only
Correct.
per server it is at a different scale.
Okay. So I get that. I think I pretty much understand now. I get that. Yeah. Thank you. Vinod.
Agree. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for the opportunity. So Abhi, if nothing else, if others don't have questions, we can end the call maybe.
We can continue, Vinod.
Yeah, I'm done. So
Yeah.
if others do not have questions, we can end the call.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, you have any questions? See, I actually have a one question, Vinod. Basically coming from variable background. My question is that how you are, see, we know that as a risk-based processors, we have set of registers, and we actually use everything is basically based on registers and all those things. How actually you guys, what is the design motto for you for AI workloads? And right now nowadays we are going more into AI based systems, and I will not be surprised when we have pushing the AI to the systems component also. If you see the research from the research perspective also, right, even the systems programming is also trying to leverage AI. How these how like P10 is going to address these concerns?
Yeah, so see, we are actually talking about different levels. One is instruction set architecture. So even if it's a AI, ML, whatever it is, at the down, right, it has to go through the instruction set architecture.
Yes.
And stuff like that. So how it's optimized for AI and ML is optimization comes at different levels. One is powered architecture, actually core runs at very high frequency, and then the operations which are done, right, like fixed point units, floating point units, and then vector units. Actually, if you see for AI and ML internally, those are different vector units, floating point instructions, or the ones which get operated depending upon the application of AI and ML also. So when underlying these units are very fast, and then the register operations are very fast, instructions work very fast, that is one kind of optimization you get for AI and ML. And that's how power processor is very optimized for it. And then other level which comes up is at application level and stack level, where OS is optimized, hypervisor is optimized. So the optimization is at different levels.
So the question is, like, for example, when we do the machine learning training, right? We do have like high precision training and the low precision training, where we actually double the floating point precisions. So how these are the very new techniques, and it is becoming popular from a few years, from very recently, from 2 or 3 years. How these are things are incorporated here?
Yeah, so as I was going through the architecture, so different floating point, like operations are supported, like single precision, double precision, then 128-bit too. And then there are in P10, which is not out in the market, but specification and then the release, everything is done in the market. so there is a new unit called MMA where, you know, it's like for matrix multiplications, there are instructions which are very optimized and which are fast, you know, and then which have high number good performance. So that's how, you know, underlying they will be using this micro architectural features, and then that's how you will get performance. So there is a single precision support, there is a double precision support in floating point, and then there are vector instructions which can operate on 16 bytes, and there are vector instructions which can operate on 32 byte, you know, all of that. So different things. Actually, the ones which I've just told, MMA instructions, they in fact work on 16 byte registers. So, you know, it's like you are trying to, one instruction is trying to operate on a lot of registers, and in matrix multiplication, that's what happens, right? You are actually doing a multiplication on a row and on a column and stuff like that, and then those instructions give you an optimized performance. So underlying this microarchitecture, this architecture is what is helping you to get performance in the talk at a higher level in AI and ML.
Okay. Yeah, that's it from my side. If you have any questions, please post in the chat box so that we can ask Vinod.
Sure.
Yeah, let's wait for a few minutes, Vinod.
Mr. Vinod?
Hey.
Yeah, Mr. Vinod, this is Mohan. Am I audible?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so we are actually particularly looking at the FPGA implementation of this A2I core.
Okay.
You had some slides, but can you just go to the slide again, that FPGA implementation part?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Which FPGA was it implemented in? You have mentioned some FPGA that you have used.
Xilinx.
Okay.
Xilinx VU3P FPGA.
Yeah. Actually, we are. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we are planning to use Xilinx Zinc FPGA.
Okay.
The RTX FPGA.
Okay.
So what kind of environment settings are required to be changed or something? Does it directly compile, or does it have any compilation problem with the instruction set architecture that you have already given?
Yeah, so I actually did not deal with it directly, but I can get some help if required. So I actually deal more with the architecture, all of that, which you guys are trying to compile on FPGA, but I really work on the real hardware. So I don't directly work on FPGA. But then if you have specific questions, you can mail me. I can get you the answers and stuff like that, or you need more details, I can help you out.
Hey Mohan, this is Arjun. Maybe Vinod, with your permission, I would like to just share a couple of insights based on the experiences I had of the A2O core porting an FPGA. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, please feel.
Yeah.
Hey, Mohan, see, we also tried to do a similar exercise, and the FPGA that we are trying to use is ZC104, okay, which is a Zinc Ultra Scale Plus board, which comes with a PSPL architecture. On the PL side, we are trying to port this design. So yeah, it is not that straightforward, like you said. So the incompatibility issues that you would be experiencing is with respect to the Simprim and Uni. So basically, Simprim is for synthesis, okay? So when you try to translate this particular IBM specific processor core net to the NGC compatible netlist of Xilinx, you will face some issues. So you will have to reach out to the Xilinx team in getting support for those switches. I am not sure whether you are having a full-time license available for Vivado if you are trying to port it on Xilinx or not. That is a prerequisite actually.
We have a full-time license actually. We have.
Okay.
Got it.
So if
We
that
just
is the
got it.
case, then it is great. And at the same time, if you wanted to run some simulations on it, Unisim is also required. Unisim compatibility with respect to Unisim. So this can be achieved by getting proper support from the Xilinx the application team.
Okay.
It is not that straightforward. See, I'm still trying to answer in a superficial way, whichever I have experienced. It is not that straightforward. But from the Xilinx front, I don't think. See, the point is what you require to port on an FPGA is a synthesizable RTL. So my observation, as far as the A2I, not A2O, let me tell you, A2I, which I have tried, like I've been trying for the past a few days only, not much of time. But what I noticed is it is kind of agnostic to any of these libraries and all that. It is pretty much a synthesizable RTL. I think all those constraints comes with respect to core generation and all that. But for porting on the FPGA, it's as equivalent as the need of having a synthesizable RTL, and that is what it is.
So you have ported the architecture in the FPGA, and
We are trying to do that. We are still trying to do that. Okay.
Okay.
We are also doing the same exercise. We are still not successful because so actually the idea on a top level to share with you, maybe if I'm not taking much time, is we wanted to actually use this Power A2O core for executing one edge detection application actually. So for that we wanted to replace the existing DPU, deep learning processing unit, with this. So not replacement as such. We are already having an ARM core on the Zinc processor.
Yeah.
For the application processing unit, we want A2O to be to replace the ARM core. DPU is still there, the deep learning processing unit, which will actually process this network. The AML network is still there.
Okay.
Earlier, the situation was everything. That ARM core was a hard IP which was available on the PS side, fixed logic side. But just to come up with an accelerated implementation of this application, we wanted to see if everything can be moved to the PL side. So basically, it will be A2O core and the AXI4 connected to DPU. That's how it is. That's the plan. That is what we are planning to achieve, and run the application. And we are also trying to understand if there can be any OS which can be ported, because the ARM core, which comes as a hard IP of this UltraScale Zinc series, comes with a PETA Linux.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
Vinod can help us out if there is any support for. In fact, I wanted to ask this question. Vinod, is there any proprietary line OS, or is there any compatibility for any OS where we can port on top of A2O or A2I? Any inputs that you have on that?
I heard last Linux can be run on it, but I can check and get more details on it.
That it will be great if we can get support, some guidance on that. Vinod and Ganeshan, if you are hearing. So this is something which can help us out in implementing a few more applications on top of A2 or A2I.
Yeah, sure. I think actually Ganeshan, I discussed, actually he also knows some contacts, I think. So we'll sync. So basically you want to know what OS can be run. And I heard it's Linux we can run, but I can confirm that, and we can see if any information we can get you there.
Sure. Mohan, see, I am still at a very nascent phase of implementing, but
Yeah.
I thought I will be able to share some insight, though I'm completely not successful, but we are still trying to work on it. I thought these insights will be helpful, so hence I shared.
Yeah, I really appreciate. Thank you so much. We are also just starting, just porting on the FPGA and things like that. Ultimate goal is to just port the Linux or any other OS, as you asked, specific OS to be ported. Nevertheless, we'll try to get some support from Xilinx as well as from IBM through email conversations.
Okay. Off the line, one input. Maybe I'm taking much more time. Excuses for that. But then, so the thing is, limited support that you'll get from Xilinx.
Okay.
Unless you have an alliance partnership or you have purchased the Xilinx board, or at least anything, you know. I mean, unless there are any commercials involved, they will straight away ask you to post in the Xilinx forum, and you will probably have to. There is only one person by name Oliver from France who will give you some answers. Maybe once in a fortnight he'll respond. So I'm trying to bring in the ground reality.
Okay.
Yeah. You know that I took a few minutes of your time. So
No
sorry
problem.
for that, but yeah.
And Arjun, and thank you for providing these insights. It is particularly helpful, like novices like me, who is actually trying to figure out few things. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And once again, I thank Vinod for presenting the this architecture and taking the time to answer very patiently. So. Thank you, Vinod, for the wonderful presentation you had. So we will close this session, and if we get another opportunity, we will start once again new session from Vinod, and looking forward for that. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Hello.